Grizzly and brown bear attacks aren't always explosive battles. They're unpredictable tests of instinct, chance, and survival. Whether it's a silent ambush near cubs, a defensive charge sparked by a parachute landing, or a hulking predator flipping river stones with surgical precision, each encounter reveals how power and intelligence coexist in these apex creatures. The line between observation and fatal confrontation is razor thin, shifting with every snap of a twig or flicker of movement. These stories take us from an awestruck research team in Alaska to a brutal mauling in Eastern Europe, and everything in between. In the summer of 2018, the remote mountain ranges of northern Alaska stretched endlessly under the midnight sun, their rugged peaks and pristine valleys harboring some of North America's most formidable wildlife. This vast wilderness, designated as a protected reserve in 1980, had long served as an undisturbed sanctuary for countless generations of grizzly bears. Its isolation meant that few humans ever ventured into its depths, making it the ideal location for Dr. Ezekiel Thornsberry and his research team to conduct their annual wildlife population survey. Dr. Thornsberry, a seasoned wildlife biologist affiliated with a major state university, had spent over 2 decades studying Arctic ecosystems. His colleague, Dr. Minerva Blackstone, focused on bear behavioral patterns, while their graduate assistant, Jasper Wyndham, was responsible for managing technical equipment and recording documentation. The trio had established their research camp near a major river system, where salmon runs during the late summer months typically attracted a high level of bear activity. The team's mission was straightforward yet vital: to document grizzly bear populations, monitor their health, and assess how ongoing environmental changes might be affecting traditional feeding patterns. On August 15th, their research took an unexpected turn. Dr. Thornsberry had been reviewing camera trap footage when he observed unusual movement patterns near one of their monitoring stations. The infrared footage captured earlier that morning revealed something remarkable. A massive grizzly bear, larger than any previously documented specimen in their research, had approached the salmon spawning grounds with a methodical precision that stood out sharply from normal bear behavior. As Dr. Blackstone reviewed the footage, her interest quickly escalated. The bear, when rearing on its hind legs, appeared to stand nearly 9 feet tall. Using established reference markers positioned along the riverbank, she estimated its weight to exceed 1,100 pounds. If confirmed, this would place the animal among the largest grizzlies ever recorded in the wild. Yet beyond its size, the bear's behavior was what truly captivated the team. Rather than engaging in the frenzied salmon chasing typical of grizzly feeding behavior during peak spawning, this particular bear demonstrated a level of patience and strategic decision-making that defied expectations. It approached the riverbank not at the areas where salmon congregated most densely, but at quieter stretches avoided by other bears. With deliberate movements, the grizzly began overturning large river stones with its paws, revealing hidden caches of salmon eggs and larvae beneath. Each action was calculated, revealing a striking intelligence in its foraging strategy. This was not opportunistic feeding. It was efficient, energy-conserving, and highly focused. Jasper recorded each step of the process in detail. The bear would investigate each overturned rock, delicately extract the protein-rich eggs using its claws, and then move to the next promising site. The behavior continued uninterrupted for nearly 3 hours. Dr. Blackstone estimated that during this span, the animal consumed the nutritional equivalent of several adult salmon, without expending the energy usually required for pursuit or competition. Dr. Thornsberry recognized this as evidence of adaptive behavior, likely refined over generations. In the Arctic, where summer is fleeting and winter hibernation looms, maximizing caloric intake with minimal energy expenditure can be critical to survival. This bear had not only adapted, it had excelled. Eager for a clearer view, the team attempted to approach for better observation. However, despite its bulk, the grizzly demonstrated acute environmental awareness. Each time the researchers drew closer, the animal would halt its feeding, raise its head, and scan its surroundings. Then, with quiet efficiency, it would retreat deeper into the wilderness before they could capture clearer footage. Rather than frustration, the researchers felt admiration. Dr. Blackstone interpreted the bear's behavior as a mark of evolutionary success, an animal that had thrived in isolation by remaining wary of all potential threats. Unlike bears in more accessible areas, which had become partially habituated to human presence, this one remained cautious, reinforcing its mastery of survival in the wild. Over the next several days, the team gathered additional recordings, further confirming their earlier observations. The bear reappeared along different stretches of the river system at varying times, as if possessing an internal schedule attuned to salmon activity and the availability of hidden egg deposits. It moved with confidence, seemingly aware of the river's rhythms and the feeding opportunities each location afforded. Its presence had ripple effects across the ecosystem. Smaller bears avoided the areas it frequented. Caribou herds adjusted their migration routes, avoiding the river crossings it favored. Even wolf packs, normally apex predators in the region, appeared reluctant to venture near its territory. The researchers watched as entire sections of the valley fell quiet during its feeding hours, a rare dominance that extended beyond brute strength. By the season's end, the team had compiled a trove of data on what they believed to be not only one of the largest, but also one of the most behaviorally sophisticated grizzly bears ever studied in the wild. Their findings contributed to a broader understanding of how these animals adapt to shifting environmental pressures, displaying both physical resilience and remarkable cognitive adaptability. The experience left a lasting impression on all three members of the expedition. What they had witnessed went beyond mere observation. It was a glimpse into the untamed complexity of an animal long misunderstood as driven solely by instinct. The bear's intelligence, caution, and foraging innovation pointed to a deeper story of survival in a harsh and unforgiving land. As they broke down their camp and prepared for the return trek, a renewed sense of purpose settled over the group. The Arctic wilderness, with all its beauty and danger, had once again revealed something extraordinary. Their resolve to protect these ecosystems, for the sake of both science and the creatures that call them home, was stronger than ever. In the early autumn of 2019, a remote protected wilderness area in the northwestern United States displayed its characteristic rugged beauty. Towering peaks and dense forests spread for miles, largely unchanged since the region's designation as a national preserve over a century earlier. The area's vast acreage of pristine terrain harbored one of the most robust grizzly bear populations in the lower 48 states, with an estimated 300 bears roaming its backcountry. Thick underbrush and abundant berry patches provided ideal conditions for these massive predators, although wilderness officials consistently reminded visitors that human-bear encounters, while uncommon, could prove deadly without proper precautions. Thomas Whitaker and his teenage daughter Emily had chosen this secluded corner of the wilderness for what they hoped would become a meaningful bonding experience. Thomas had been planning the hiking trip for several months, eager to share his love of remote exploration with Emily before she left for college. They had secured the required backcountry permits and familiarized themselves with detailed trail maps. Still, the route they selected would lead them into areas with documented high bear activity. The morning of September 12th brought ideal conditions for their journey. The weather was brisk yet clear, and patches of clouds drifted overhead, casting occasional shade as they progressed along a little-used path that branched from more popular routes. Thomas had deliberately selected this less-traveled trail to avoid crowds and immerse them in a more authentic wilderness experience. However, that decision would soon bring them closer to danger than he had ever anticipated. Wildlife monitoring records showed that grizzly activity had increased in this area during late summer. The bears, driven by instinct to prepare for winter hibernation, were consuming large quantities of huckleberries and other high-energy foods. Rangers had posted advisories recommending hikers stay on designated paths and make consistent noise to avoid startling any nearby animals. Nonetheless, Thomas and Emily had veered onto a faint game trail that wove through dense vegetation, unknowingly placing themselves at heightened risk. As they pushed through a particularly thick stand of brush, neither recognized the subtle warning signs that experienced outdoorsmen might have noticed. Fresh claw marks on nearby trees, recently disturbed earth, and a pungent, musky scent clinging to the air all went unrecognized. Their focus remained fixed on maneuvering through the terrain. Suddenly, a massive grizzly erupted from the undergrowth. The bear seemed to materialize out of nowhere, though experts would later conclude that it had likely been bedded down in the heavy cover, startled when the pair ventured too close. In a matter of seconds, the animal closed the distance between them, propelled by nearly 400 pounds of muscle and instinctive fury. Thomas's reaction was immediate and selfless. Recognizing the imminent threat, he shoved Emily behind the largest nearby tree, placing himself directly in the path of the charging bear. He tried to recall the safety measures he had studied, dropping to the ground, protecting vital areas, but the speed and force of the attack left no time to act. The bear's impact knocked him off his feet. With brutal efficiency, the grizzly struck with its paws, inflicting deep lacerations across his upper body. Its jaws closed around his forearm, and he felt himself dragged across the uneven ground as the animal attempted to move him away from what it perceived as a territorial threat. Sharp stones tore at his back and limbs, but adrenaline dulled the pain as he struggled against the assault. Emily remained frozen behind the tree, paralyzed by fear, but aware that her father was enduring the attack to protect her. Every sound, the crashing brush, her father's groans, the bear's growls, imprinted itself with terrible clarity. The attack could have continued far longer, but distant voices changed the course of events. A group of seasoned backpackers, hiking along a nearby main trail, heard the unmistakable sounds of distress. Recognizing the situation instantly, they sprinted toward the commotion. As they closed in, they began shouting and hurling rocks toward the scene, hoping to deter the animal through sheer noise and aggression. Their efforts succeeded. The combination of shouting and incoming projectiles startled the grizzly enough that it disengaged. It released the wounded man and retreated into the underbrush, although it lingered just beyond view for several tense minutes before finally withdrawing deeper into the forest. Thomas's injuries were severe. He had sustained deep gashes requiring extensive surgical repair, significant blood loss, and permanent nerve damage in one arm. He was weak, disoriented, and barely conscious. Yet the intervention by the other hikers had almost certainly saved both his and Emily's lives. Emergency response teams arrived within the hour by helicopter, though the challenging terrain delayed the evacuation. Officials investigating the incident later confirmed that the grizzly had likely been protecting cubs hidden nearby, which explained its heightened aggression and refusal to flee. The encounter reignited public discussion about hiking safety in areas inhabited by grizzlies. Wilderness authorities renewed warnings about venturing into thick vegetation, stressing the importance of carrying bear spray, traveling in groups, and maintaining vocal presence while on the trail. The incident served as a stark reminder that in wilderness country, human instincts are often no match for the raw power of a territorial predator. For Thomas and Emily, the experience left permanent physical and emotional scars. But it also revealed an unshakable bond between them. His selfless reaction in the face of mortal danger had spared his daughter and helped avert what could have become a tragic headline. It also underscored the importance of respecting the wilderness, not only for its beauty, but also for its unpredictability and power. During the harsh winter of 2016, a remote island off the southern coast of Alaska presented one of the most challenging hunting environments in North America. Spanning over 3,500 square miles of rugged wilderness, the island had been home to the world's largest brown bears for thousands of years. These bears, genetically isolated from their mainland cousins, had evolved into truly massive specimens. Adult males regularly exceeded 1,500 pounds during peak feeding seasons. The island's extreme remoteness and unpredictable weather made it accessible only to the most experienced hunters, those in search of legendary game and prepared to face the dangers that came with it. Jack Brenner was one of them. A seasoned hunter with over 30 years of big game experience, Jack had traveled to the island that November to track moose during the late hunting season. He had obtained all the necessary permits and enlisted local guides familiar with the island's punishing terrain. But on the morning of November 18th, he decided to scout alone, trusting in his years of field experience and confident in his own sense of caution. The weather that morning was typical for the region. Low, overcast skies, scattered snow flurries, and a sharp wind that kept temperatures just below freezing. Jack followed a promising trail through dense alder thickets, reading fresh moose tracks as he moved cautiously across uneven ground. But as he advanced deeper into the thickets, he began noticing other signs, ones that gave him pause. Deep claw marks had been scored into the bark of nearby trees. Massive paw prints, easily wider than a man's open hand, had pressed into patches of soft earth. A heavy, musky scent lingered in the air, unmistakable to anyone who had hunted near large carnivores. Though most bears in the region enter hibernation by late November, warmer than usual conditions had left some animals still active. Wildlife biologists would later explain that this particular bear had likely been preparing for winter, aggressively seeking out the last available food sources and defending them from potential competitors. Jack was crouched low, inspecting the depth of a moose track, when the bear appeared. It emerged suddenly from a wall of alder less than 50 yards away. A towering male, nearly 10 feet tall when it reared on its hind legs, and weighing well over 1,200 pounds. There was no hesitation in its movements. The bear dropped to all fours and charged, closing ground with astonishing speed for an animal of its size. Years of experience kicked in. Jack raised his rifle, a high-powered bolt-action chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, and fired his first shot when the bear was about 30 yards out. The bullet struck the bear in the shoulder, but the thick hide, muscle, and fat absorbed much of the impact. The animal barely flinched. A second shot followed, center mass, but the bear's rapid, erratic movement made precise placement nearly impossible. 2 more rounds struck the torso and front leg, but the bear didn't stop. Its endurance, evolved over countless generations in one of Earth's harshest climates, allowed it to push through wounds that would have brought down almost any other creature. By the time Jack fired a 5th time, the bear had closed the distance to within 15 yards. He could see the blood now, streaming from wounds in the shoulder and chest, and hear the furious huffing of its breath. The bullet struck bone, sending the animal stumbling momentarily, but it recovered almost instantly and surged forward again. The 6th round caught the bear in the neck. That stopped it. Briefly. It hesitated, shook its massive head, and took a step sideways. Blood began frothing from its mouth. Jack's hands trembled as he worked the bolt and chambered another round, acutely aware that he was running low on ammunition and had only seconds left. The 7th shot struck deep into the chest. The bear staggered, clearly weakened, its movements no longer fluid. Blood coated its fur. Its growls were now gurgled, but it remained upright. Less than 10 yards separated them. Jack's final shot was delivered with grim focus. It struck squarely, tearing through vitals. The massive animal rocked backward, then dropped with a muffled crash into the snow-covered ground. Its body shuddered once, then stillness. Only then did Jack lower the rifle. He stood frozen, heart pounding, staring at the downed predator. It had died just feet from where he stood. Even in its final moments, it had remained a threat, massive, relentless, and unwilling to retreat. His coat was torn, his shirt shredded beneath it. Claw marks raked across his left arm and side, souvenirs from the seconds when the bear had briefly reached him before the final shot took effect. Blood soaked through the fabric, but the pain hadn't registered during the encounter. Only now, as the adrenaline began to drain from his system, did he feel the burning sting of each wound. Wildlife officials who later inspected the site confirmed the bear's exceptional size and noted the extraordinary number of vital hits it had sustained before succumbing. They emphasized that large bears in the region often take multiple shots to bring down, even when using high-caliber rifles. Hunters are advised never to assume a single round will be sufficient. These animals are not just physically powerful. They are built to withstand injury and capable of continuing an attack, even while mortally wounded. The incident served as a sobering reminder of the risks involved in pursuing such formidable game. It reinforced the importance of situational awareness, remaining calm under pressure, and carrying sufficient ammunition when venturing into bear country. For Jack Brenner, the encounter left not just physical scars, but a deep respect for the animal he had faced. He had hunted across 4 continents, pursued dangerous game in some of the most unforgiving regions on Earth, but nothing had come as close as this. He walked away alive, but he never returned. In the late summer of 2017, a remote section of the Appalachian Trail in Western Virginia wound through dense hardwood forests that had supported black bear populations since long before European settlement. This particular stretch of the 100-mile route passed through areas where increasing human presence had led to food-conditioned bears, animals that had begun to associate hikers with potential meals. Wildlife officials had documented several troubling encounters in the preceding months, though none had escalated to the tragic level that was about to unfold. A group of 11 hikers, organized through various outdoor clubs across the mid-Atlantic, had planned a weekend backpacking trip through this scenic but challenging section of the trail. The group was a mix of seasoned hikers and enthusiastic newcomers, all of whom had completed basic wilderness safety training and carried bear deterrent gear, including spray, noisemakers, and proper food storage containers. Leading the group was Sarah Denning, a 34-year-old nurse and experienced hiker who had spent over 5 years section hiking the Appalachian Trail. Her steady temperament and deep familiarity with trail conditions made her the group's natural choice for lead navigator. That morning, August 26th, the group made good progress as they descended a section of trail that wound through particularly thick mountain laurel and rhododendron. Recent rain had softened the forest floor, allowing for near-silent movement from both hikers and wildlife, an unfortunate combination under the wrong circumstances. Unbeknownst to the group, a large black bear had been frequenting the area for weeks, exhibiting increasingly bold behavior around humans. Wildlife investigators later determined that the bear, estimated to weigh around 350 pounds, had likely been fed by well-meaning but careless hikers. It had lost its natural fear of humans, a dangerous shift that can transform an animal from cautious scavenger to unpredictable predator. The attack occurred in an instant. As Sarah rounded a sharp bend where the dense vegetation created a tunnel-like effect, the bear burst from a nearby thicket just 6 feet away. There was no bluff charge, no hesitation. The animal lunged directly into her with stunning force, knocking her off her feet before she could raise a hand in defense. Her hiking pole was no match for the bear's sheer power. It swatted through her gear and outerwear with terrifying ease, its claws opening deep wounds along her arms and side. Her cries alerted the rest of the group, who were staggered along the trail just behind. Among them was Carlos Mejia, a 41-year-old EMT and avid backpacker who immediately recognized the severity of the situation. The group shouted, waved their arms, and began hurling rocks and branches in an attempt to drive the bear off. But the bear was in a state of frenzy, focused, aggressive, and disturbingly unafraid. It seized Sarah's arm in its jaws and began dragging her from the trail, behavior that biologists later identified as unmistakably predatory. This was not defensive action brought on by surprise or the protection of cubs. The bear had marked her as prey. Despite the group's escalating efforts, louder yelling, thrown debris, even one hiker jabbing with a sharpened stick, the bear held on. It tore into Sarah's upper torso and neck while dragging her into a low gully off the trail. The others advanced cautiously, but were powerless to intervene directly without placing themselves in similar danger. Only when several hikers began striking rocks together and thrusting large branches toward the bear did it finally release Sarah and retreat about 20 yards into the brush. Even then, it did not flee. It remained visible, circling just out of reach, displaying the same aggressive posture that suggested the encounter was far from over. Rachel Lynn, a 29-year-old wilderness guide, and Carlos worked quickly to render aid. Sarah's injuries were catastrophic. Deep lacerations, significant blood loss, and damage to vital areas made survival unlikely even under ideal circumstances. They applied pressure to wounds and attempted to manage her breathing, but the trauma was overwhelming. Two group members, James Kehoe and Amanda Roth, took off in opposite directions to reach the nearest road and summon emergency assistance. The others formed a defensive perimeter around Sarah, using their backpacks and trekking poles to keep the bear at bay as it lingered on the edge of the clearing, occasionally advancing before retreating again in frustration. The group waited over 2 hours before help arrived by helicopter. During that time, the bear remained within close range, never fully disappearing from view. When the rescue team reached the site, they found Sarah had already succumbed to her injuries. The bear vanished into the dense undergrowth before wildlife officers could track it. Subsequent investigations confirmed that the animal had been food-conditioned, likely the result of hikers leaving improperly stored food or intentionally feeding wildlife. This pattern of human interaction had dismantled the bear's natural avoidance instincts, creating a creature that saw people not as threats, but as food providers, and eventually, food themselves. Officials stressed that black bears, though smaller than their grizzly counterparts, are more than capable of fatal attacks, especially when their behavior has been altered by human contact. They reiterated the importance of strict food storage protocols, the dangers of feeding wildlife, and the unpredictable consequences of habituation. The incident prompted an overhaul of trail safety procedures along that stretch of the Appalachian Trail. Additional bear awareness programs were launched, signage increased, and enforcement of food storage regulations was expanded. While black bear attacks remained statistically rare, The tragedy served as a chilling reminder that when human habits intersect with wild behavior, even familiar trails can become deadly. Sarah Denning's death was mourned across the hiking community. A quiet memorial was placed near the site by her fellow hikers, marked only by a pile of stones and a carved wooden plaque. For those who knew her, and for those who read her story, her loss remained a haunting symbol of the wild's unforgiving edge. In the remote wilderness of Russia's eastern frontier during the summer of 2020, the vast taiga forests of Amur Oblast remained largely untouched by development. These sprawling woodlands were home to one of the most robust populations of Russian brown bears in the world. Massive and powerful, these bears, close relatives of the North American grizzly, could exceed 800 pounds and were known for highly territorial behavior, especially when startled. Their isolation from humans made direct encounters rare, but when they did occur, the bears' lack of fear or familiarity often made such meetings especially hazardous. 3 members of an extreme sports club based in the Russian Far East had planned a bold parachuting expedition into this region as part of a summer wilderness challenge. The group, made up of experienced jumpers, had completed numerous descents in difficult conditions across various remote locations in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The team leader, Sergei Volkov, was a former military paratrooper with over 200 jumps to his credit. His teammates, Anton Lebedev and Dmitry Sokolov, were skilled civilian adventurers who had been parachuting together for several years. Though all 3 were thoroughly trained in parachuting safety and carried emergency communication devices, none of them had direct experience with large wildlife or remote forest survival. On July 14th, clear skies and mild wind provided ideal conditions for their drop. The team selected a small meadow deep in the taiga, roughly 150 kilometers northeast of the nearest major city. The site was surrounded by dense conifers and far removed from human habitation, prime bear habitat. Their jump aircraft, a sturdy utility biplane, released the 3 men from an altitude of 4,000 meters. From above, the target zone appeared open and suitable for a safe descent, with little sign of any immediate hazards. The jump began without issue. The trio maintained stable formation as they descended toward the treetops, but as Sergei neared the landing area, his parachute caught the high branches of several tall pines on the clearing's edge. The tangled chute pulled him off balance and he landed hard, crashing awkwardly through low branches before hitting the forest floor near the tree line. Disoriented and struggling to untangle himself, Sergei made considerable noise in the otherwise silent forest, tearing nylon, swearing under his breath and shifting branches. Unbeknownst to him, a large Russian brown bear had been resting in a shaded den just beyond the clearing. Wildlife experts would later confirm that bears in such remote regions, having little or no exposure to humans, tended to respond to strange disturbances with unfiltered territorial aggression. The bear emerged from the undergrowth with alarming speed. Sergei, still fighting his tangled harness, saw the bear only moments before its first swipe caught him across the shoulder. The blow, delivered with astonishing force, knocked him back into the parachute lines. The fabric wrapped around his legs, further restricting his movement as the bear advanced. Anton, who had landed near the meadow's center, turned toward the commotion and instantly understood the danger. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward Sergei's position. As he neared the tree line, the bear pivoted and charged. A quick swing of its massive paw sent Anton sprawling, but he managed to tumble away and avoid a second strike. His injuries were minor, but the close call forced him to retreat. At the far end of the clearing, Dmitry touched down safely and immediately assessed the unfolding crisis. Rather than rushing into the confrontation, he activated his emergency satellite beacon to summon help, knowing that a direct engagement might only worsen the situation. He moved to higher ground and kept visual contact with the others while remaining well outside the bear's reach. The animal did not pursue the fleeing jumpers. Instead, it settled between them and the trees it had emerged from, raising its hackles and emitting deep vocalizations. Experts would later confirm the behavior as classic defensive posturing, meant not to hunt but to assert dominance over a perceived territorial threat. Within minutes, the distress signal had reached a nearby emergency coordination center, though the region's remoteness meant a helicopter response would take nearly 2 hours. In the meantime, Sergei remained conscious but was bleeding heavily from his wounds. His companions administered basic first aid while maintaining a safe distance from the bear, which lingered for another half hour without making further advances. When the rescue helicopter finally arrived, the bear had retreated into the dense woods beyond the clearing. Emergency crews stabilized Sergei and airlifted both injured men to a hospital in the city. Sergei's condition was serious, but thanks to prompt evacuation, he survived. He required surgery to repair torn muscle and nerve damage in his arm, but doctors were confident in his long-term recovery. Regional wildlife officials launched an investigation into the incident and concluded that the bear's actions were consistent with animals defending territory rather than attempting to feed. In the absence of human contact, such bears default to natural instincts when confronted by unfamiliar sounds or smells, especially in areas near bedding sites or young. The episode ignited discussion within Russia's adventure sports community. Experts emphasized the importance of researching wildlife behavior before entering isolated habitats. The Extreme Sports Club involved soon implemented stricter wildlife risk assessments for all future wilderness jumps, including consultations with local conservation officers. Though all three men eventually returned to parachuting, they chose future jump zones with a new awareness of local ecology. For Sergei, Anton, and Dmitry, the expedition was no longer just a brush with danger. It was a sobering reminder that in the deep wilderness, survival sometimes hinges less on parachute skill than on understanding the unseen rules of the land they fall into. In the autumn of 2021, the rugged expanse of the Carpathian Mountains unfolded across the Romanian landscape in a display of wild splendor. These ancient peaks, home to the largest population of brown bears in Europe outside of Russia, offered a rare glimpse into a largely untouched wilderness. Roughly 6,000 brown bears roamed these dense forests of beech, fir, and spruce, relatively isolated from heavy human development. However, an uptick in tourism had begun to blur the lines between civilization and nature, leading to more frequent and sometimes dangerous interactions between people and wildlife. A close-knit group of 5 friends from Bucharest had planned a hiking reunion to mark their college graduation. It was meant to be a celebratory journey, one final adventure before their lives diverged onto separate professional paths. The group had grown up together, their bond forged in childhood and reinforced through university years, making this excursion into the wild a symbolic moment of transition. The trip had been organized by Pavel Dragomir, the youngest member at 23, who also had the most outdoor experience. His companions, Andrei, Matei, Irina, and Serena, trusted his lead when it came to route selection and basic wilderness precautions. Yet none among them possessed formal training in how to handle encounters with large wildlife. On the morning of October 8th, the group found themselves trekking a well-established forest trail in one of Romania's protected mountainous reserves. The landscape was stunning, dominated by steep limestone cliffs and teeming with wildlife. Though tranquil in appearance, signs posted at trailheads had warned of increased bear activity in recent weeks, a development attributed to delayed seasonal berry production, which had left many bears scrambling for food ahead of winter hibernation. With food sources diminished, several bears had been observed venturing into atypical areas, exhibiting behaviors that concerned biologists and conservationists alike. Some had grown unusually bold, and in certain cases even aggressive, especially the females guarding cubs. As the group meandered along a shaded trail deep in the forest, their conversation centered on upcoming jobs, plans to travel, and the uncertainty of post-graduation adulthood. The atmosphere was light and filled with laughter, until the moment everything changed. Suddenly they turned a bend and were confronted by the unmistakable sight of a large brown bear, accompanied by 2 cubs. The adult female, estimated to weigh over 400 pounds, reacted instantly. Her body tensed, posture stiffened, and guttural vocalizations cut through the forest silence. The humans had stumbled far too close. A mother bear with cubs is among the most dangerous situations a hiker can face. Her maternal instincts transformed her into a singular force of defense, and her aggressive body language left little doubt. She perceived a threat, and she would act on it. In a moment of instinct and protective courage, Pavel stepped forward, positioning himself between his friends and the bear. He hoped his movement would diffuse the situation and buy time, but the bear misinterpreted his gesture as an advance toward her cubs. Without hesitation, she charged. The distance closed in seconds. The forest erupted in chaos as the massive predator collided with Pavel, knocking him to the ground with crushing force. What followed was a frenzied attack, a blur of claws, teeth, and panic. Her razor-sharp claws tore through his jacket and into his flesh, while her powerful jaws clamped down on his shoulder and torso, breaking ribs and causing severe internal trauma. Pavel's friends froze for an instant before springing into action. Their shouts echoed through the trees as they scrambled for rocks, branches, or any object that could be used to intervene. They created as much noise as possible, hoping to distract the bear, to remind her she was outnumbered. Their efforts began to take effect. The bear's focus wavered between Pavel and the shouting, moving group behind him. After several excruciating minutes, their persistence paid off. The bear finally backed away, retreating with her cubs approximately 50 yards into the brush. Yet she didn't leave. She remained visible, pacing, watching. Her body still tense, ready to return if provoked. The group found themselves in a terrifying limbo, tending to a severely wounded friend while keeping eyes on the bear, who might at any moment resume her attack. Pavel had sustained catastrophic injuries. Deep lacerations and blood loss were compounded by broken ribs and internal bleeding. The group did what they could, using jackets and packs to stanch wounds, while one activated a satellite emergency beacon. For nearly 2 hours, the bear lingered nearby, occasionally approaching within 30 yards before backing off in response to renewed yelling and movement. Her repeated returns made clear that she had not dismissed the threat, even after the humans had backed off. Eventually, emergency responders arrived via helicopter, though the rescue was complicated by the remote terrain and the bear's continued presence. Medical personnel had to execute the extraction with extreme caution, ensuring that neither the rescuers nor the bear were startled. After 3 tense hours, Pavel was airlifted to a trauma facility in the city of Brasov. Pavel survived, but the path ahead would be long and difficult. He underwent multiple surgeries to repair internal damage and would require extensive physical therapy to regain basic function. Beyond the physical toll, the psychological impact on all 5 friends was immense. The reunion hike that was supposed to symbolize their launch into adulthood had transformed into a grim encounter with nature's unforgiving reality. Authorities later conducted a thorough investigation. Their conclusion was clear. The mother bear's actions were consistent with defensive behavior. She had responded to a perceived threat in a predictable and natural manner. Wildlife officials used the incident to reinforce guidance for hiking in bear-inhabited regions, stressing the need to maintain distance, avoid surprising animals, and never approach cubs. 3 years later, Pavel's life had changed in unexpected ways. Rather than retreating from nature, he embraced it more deeply. He trained as a wilderness safety instructor, eventually earning certification to teach bear encounter protocols. His traumatic experience became the foundation for a new purpose, educating others on how to coexist safely with wild animals. He frequently gave presentations to hiking clubs and outdoor organizations across Eastern Europe. His message was not one of fear, but of respect for nature's power and unpredictability, and for the animals that inhabit these remote spaces. He emphasized that the bear had acted instinctively, not out of malice, and that greater understanding of animal behavior could help prevent future tragedies. His 4 companions, initially overwhelmed by guilt over what had happened, found comfort in Pavel's reassurance that their intervention had likely saved his life. Their bond, already strong, had deepened through the ordeal. Their shared trauma became a lifelong connection. Though Pavel's body bore scars from the attack, he came to see them not as disfigurements, but as emblems of survival. His life had taken a direction he had never anticipated, one that merged his passion for nature with a mission to protect others. While his original career plans were left behind, he found fulfillment in helping others experience the wild with knowledge, preparedness, and humility. The incident served as a sobering reminder of the risks inherent in wild places. Yet it also reinforced the need for responsible recreation and respect for ecosystems where humans remain visitors and bears the rightful residents.